and let us all do we can to build a better future.
All right. I really don't know how to address this story because there's a lot to unpack here. And I want to make it very clear here. The two-party system, both Democrats and Republicans who are in the United States Senate and House, and doesn't matter who is the president, be it Democrat or Republican, are all intertwined and interconnected to the military-industrial complex. And since 2001, the United States has been involved in forever wars. I don't think we've ever known a year of peace. We've been involved in many conflicts and coups all over the world. But I think right now, the music is about to end. And we, as citizens of this country, have a very serious decision to make. Do we, A, stand by and let our politicians lead us into the absolute destruction and extinction of humanity? Or B, do we say enough? Now, this war in Ukraine, I personally want it to stop. And I'm going to use the words of Donald Trump. No, it's not an endorsement, but he comes off as one of the most reasonable people especially in this current political environment, say for Dr. Cornel West and RFK Jr. to some extent. I want people to stop dying. I want people to stop dying. Okay? It's simple and it's to the point. Because this administration is delivering cluster bombs, more munitions, and now mobilizing reservists. So it's very rare that I will, give praise to a politician, be it Democrat or Republican. But sometimes a broken clock is right twice in a day. Now, again, Republicans are just as bloodthirsty and warmongering and war profiteering as the Democrats. But this conflict that's happening in Ukraine needs to end. It doesn't matter how it all started, it needs to end. Because if it continues on, someone's going to find that shiny red button that says nuke on it and push it and wonder what it does. So I want to pull up this video here. And I understand this is a Republican lawmaker. But let's be very clear here. The Biden-Harris administration is sleepwalking us into World War III. So again, I want to give acknowledge to Kanakoa the Great, who managed to get this 3-minute clip of Representative Matt Gaetz. Now, again, Republican politician. Not an endorsement of it, but I got to say I do agree with the words and concerns that he is bringing up here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is quite similar to the prior one, but it wouldn't just strip the cash out of the bill. It would not require further security assistance to Ukraine. And I offer this amendment because the Biden administration is sleepwalking our great country into a world war. The American people did not sign up for this, and I believe Congress needs to have the solemnity to be able to stop this madness. I miss the days when Democrats used to be anti-war. And I listened with great interest as the ranking member, who I have great respect for.
Now, how ironic is it that there was a time when even I can remember, and I'm pretty sure all of you remember, when Democrats at least put on the face. Because again, I got to challenge Representative Gaetz here saying like, oh, there was a time when they were anti-war. No, I question that. They at least put on a decent mask to show that they were anti-war. I can remember that, and I'm pretty sure all of you can remember that too. But yet, we're seeing a lot of Democratic lawmakers, including progressive lawmakers, turning a blind eye to this escalating conflict in Ukraine.
Said
a willing blind eye, mind you.
The goal of this entire Ukraine-U.S. enterprise is to ensure that we are not going to war with Russia. And that is a bit odd to hear after several Democrats have taken to this floor and media outlets to suggest we are at war with Russia. It was, in fact, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer, who came to this floor and said, we are at war with Russia. It was the gentleman from Massachusetts who just spoke on the prior amendment, who said functionally the same thing. I do not want to go to war with Russia, and I don't think the American people do either, and that does not make anyone pro-Putin.
Again, we could thank the Clinton campaign, corporate media, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, Vice, Vox, Everyone was in the Democratic establishment. Vote blue no matter who's sycophants. TYT, majority report for promoting the conspiracy theory of Russiagate, which is why we are in this maddening situation. Never forget the people that promoted Russiagate. It's because of that false story that we are in this war. Hey, let's have democracy in the chat. I know, controversial statement. Kit, how dare you say the word democracy? We don't even know what that is. Hey, type 1 if, yeah, I'm ready to go to war with Russia. It'll be like the old World War II films, and then there'll be a nice reconstruction. Type 2, no. I don't want there to be mushroom clouds in the sky and nukes a-flying everywhere. The survivors will envy the dead, man. What's wrong with you?
I would similarly observe that part of the funding assistance that we are providing to Ukraine has nothing to do with the military. In this country, we have cops, we have firemen, we have teachers who wonder whether or not their pension fund is going to be sufficient to cover their life for the service that they have given. And while that is a question in our country, it's no question in Ukraine, because the American taxpayer is underwriting all of the pensions for every single government official in Ukraine, and we don't do that for the people who put out our fires and protect our streets.
I'd go a step further. What about for all the working class people? Nonetheless, after all, this is a Republican politician, not expecting much. Hey, vote blue no matter who. I'm criticizing Republican politicians somewhat, but he's on the ball. He's more or less on target, because let's face it, billions of dollars have been funneled into this stupid, wasteful, bloody, unnecessary conflict. Now, here's a couple of things I want to see happen. I want to see the conflict end. Hopefully there's peace in the land. I don't want Ukraine to be in a situation where it's like the same thing with Israel. I mean, come on. It's again going to feel a future conflict. It should go right back to where it was from the very beginning, before the first tank or bullet was ever first tank crossed the line or first bullet was ever fired. This is unnecessary. And I don't like the fact that, again, our money has been invested into this war when that money could have been done and invested into the people here in the United States. What about the people of East Palestine? What about the people of Flint, Michigan? Hey, there's still lead in Chicago's drinking water. Again, it's madness and insanity all around. He's not wrong.
Similarly, how can we continue to just send all this money when there's a lack of accountability? The Pentagon has to fess up that they have multi-billion-dollar accounting errors in this space. And when we had the Inspector General before our House Armed Services Committee, he could not testify that our country had followed our own requirements and our own laws regarding the end-use monitoring of equipment that we are sending into a combat zone. We have unfunded needs in our own military, and I support the NDAA. I'm grateful that we've done a lot of work, but even with this NDAA, in America, there will be hangars that are rusting out. In America, there will be platforms that need upgrades, and they will go wanting, while Ukraine seems to have an unlimited amount of support in this Congress that is unwarranted. 40% of our training aircraft can't even fly in this country because we don't have sufficient parts to be able to get it to them. This war will end anytime those folks in Europe want it to. But they keep buying the Russian gas, and they keep expecting all of us in America to subsidize Europe's defense while they provide some massive social welfare state. I'm not for it, and that's why I would encourage my colleagues to vote for my amendment, and I reserve.
He's not incorrect. Now, again, I don't have to agree with everything that he said there, but look, I want this war to end, and I will work with anyone and shine a light on anyone that is calling for the end of this conflict. Be it a Republican, Libertarian, Green, Socialist, Democrat. I don't care what generation you're part of. The more this war continues on, the closer we are to the extinction of our species. And yeah, I truly do believe that. Because again, we're seeing further escalation. It's only a matter of time before the entire well, situation explodes. I want to pull up this video. This is a short video of Joe Rogan calling out the fact that we got these billions of dollars that the Biden-Harris administration is wasting, and I'm going to say that again, wasting into this war in Ukraine.
Dump billions of dollars into Ukraine.
Fucking A.
If they could dump billions of dollars into, I mean, there's so many different things that they pump money into, but they've never pumped any money into Baltimore. They never pumped any money into Detroit. Like, try to figure out a way. Like, if you can, like, think about like what Halliburton did during the Iraq War. They got these no bid contracts where Cheney was the fucking CEO of Halliburton. He becomes the vice president of the United States. And then the company he works for gets these no bid contracts to rebuild shit we blow up, which is wild. But there's profit in that, right? 100%. So what about figuring out a way to funnel that profit into fixing inner cities?
Yeah.
If we have less losers, we have a better America. Yeah. And if you give people more opportunity, you have less losers. Look,
again, I also want to pull up something else here too. Something that caught my attention. I want to give a huge shout out to this gentleman. His name is Nick. Also goes by the name Socials MMA on Twitter. You know him. He's with RBN and Revolutionary Blackout Network. And here, got to give him a shout out. Got to give him a shout out. This tweet still lives rent free in my head, as it should live in all of your heads rent free. From MTG to AOC. AOC. What is the carbon footprint of the proxy war with Russia you voted to fund? Hey, AOC. AOC. How big is that carbon footprint, AOC? 5 years of AOC. 5 years of AOC, and, you know, we got that, carbon footprint that's in Ukraine. I want to pull up this video of MTG talking about the war.
Much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to address the House about our National Defense Authorization Act. I just want to remind the House that the National Defense Authorization Act is to fund the Department of Defense, which mission is stated on their website that says their mission is to deter war and protect our nation's national security interest. My amendment is to stop cluster munitions or cluster munitions technology being sold or transferred to Ukraine. Cluster bombs are brutal, inhumane weapons that cause lasting harm to civilians in areas where they are used. When a cluster bomb is deployed, it launches multiple different submissions, which are smaller bombs in all different directions. The impact radius of cluster bombs varies, but can be as high as several football fields. This causes more widespread destruction, imposing a greater risk to civilian areas, which kills lives. It doesn't save lives. Also, this is an escalation in war. It doesn't deter war. The dud rate varies per bomb, and the dud rate is very important, but they can be typically anywhere between 2% and as high as 40%. I
want to pause it right here because, again, there's an article from RT, just to trigger the vote blue no matter who, people. U.S. cluster bombs already in Ukraine. Kiev has already received cluster munitions promised by the U.S., a Ukrainian general has told CNN. Washington has attempted to justify the delivery of the controversial arms by claiming that Ukraine would minimize the long-term threat to civilians when using them. That's not how warfare works, okay? There's always going to be civilian casualties. Why would you even say that? We just got them. We haven't used them yet, but they can radically change the battlefield, Brigadier General Alexander Tverensky told the U.S. News Network on Thursday. He added that he expects Ukrainian troops to push Russian forces back from their defensive positions thanks to the delivery. Look, just going to throw this out here. Again, when you're going to do a counteroffense, you don't broadcast it like, hey, it's going to happen this day. It's the dumbest thing ever. Okay? Number two, how many people are dying? Again, there's no way that this conflict is going to end with rainbows and sunshine, okay? It's going to end with misery and further blood. It needs to stop. My God, it needs to stop. And when MTG is calling you out, when MTG is sounding reasonable in the room, you know something's wrong. Again, I got to calm myself down because I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. Again, cluster bombs discharge dozens of submunitions over a large area. Some of the bomblets fail to detonate and can maim or kill years after their deployment. Over 100 nations, including many NATO members, have banned their production and use. The U.S. decided to supply Ukraine with old 155 millimeter artillery shells with cluster payloads stockpiled during the Cold War. President Joe Biden, that's right, the senile old grandpa himself, described the move as a stopgap, claiming that Kiev's foreign backers had no regular munitions of that caliber left to share, and that they were in the process of ramping up production. Now, again, these are old artillery shells, and we covered in a previous show on how the United States has sent broken gear to Ukraine. You know, tanks that don't work properly, Humvees that don't work properly, artillery pieces, howitzers that don't work properly. Nothing's working. Like, again, some of the products that they're getting are subpar or cheap. And again, just to give a quick reminder, not related, but somewhat related to the story, CBS did a documentary series in early 2022 talking about all the weapons that were being sent to Ukraine and how there was, no accountability or anything like that. And CBS was told to take that documentary video down. Mark my words. I hope I'm wrong. I need to be wrong about this, but 10 or 15 years down the road, those weapons are going to come back to haunt us. I want to be wrong. So mark your calendars 10, 15 years down the road. Nothing happens. I'll be so happy to say, boy, I was wrong about that. Believe you me, I want to be wrong. Continuing on, the U.S. is not party to the 2008 Convention on Cluster Munitions. What a surprise, but still had to bypass its own rules, which only ban exports of cluster bombs with a dud rate of over 1%, meaning more than 1 in 100 submunitions fail to explode. Hey, you know my old saying, what could possibly go wrong?
These bombs are very unreliable, which makes them very dangerous. Congress even passed a law in 2009 that says the U.S. cannot deploy or transfer cluster munitions with a dud rate higher than 1%, but the president can sign a waiver to bypass this restriction. The Biden administration says that they will not deliver cluster bombs to Ukraine with a dud rate higher than 2.35%. But again, the dud rate is known to be anywhere between 2% and as high as 40%, which means we do not know. Also, over 120 countries are party to the Convention on Cluster Munitions, banning the use, production, transfer, and stockpiling of these weapons, including most of the U.S.'s NATO allies, which is extremely important. And I would like to remind the House, Ukraine is not a NATO member nation. What's next? Chemical or biological weapons? Nuclear weapons? Again, this is an escalation of war that does not belong in our nation's funding bill for the Department of Defense. And with that, I'd like to reserve my time.
When MTG is being the most reasonable person in the room, things are going bad. So, what could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? How could things get any worse? Well, this just kind of happened. Biden mobilizes reservists. Up to 3,000 U.S. troops will augment Ukraine-related operations in Europe. So President Joe Biden announced on Thursday that up to 3,000 members of the United States Military Selective Reserve will be activated as part of Operation Atlantic Resolve. Oh, what a terrible name. The informal designation for Washington's efforts to support Kiev in the conflict with Russia. You know what's sad about this whole thing? I've mentioned on the show that Chicago has a thing called sister cities. Like a lot of major cities have sister cities, and they're like economic trading partners. Back in World War II, it meant something different. It had to deal with it was a sign of solidarity between the British cities that were bombed during the Blitz and, of course, what happened to the Soviet cities when the Germans invaded. And so the whole idea of like going through this struggle earned the title of being sister cities, comrades in arms, right? Chicago has sister cities almost around the globe, and two of them in particular are both Kiev and what was formerly Moscow, all right? So how interesting is it? Chicago's two sister cities, Kiev and Moscow, both in conflict. What a strange world we live in. Biden has authorized the Defense and Homeland Security departments to order to active duty any units and any individual members not assigned to a unit organized to serve as a unit of select reserve or any member of the individual ready reserve mobilization category designated as essential by department regulations. The number of mobilized reservists is not to exceed 3,000 total members at any one time, of whom more than 450 may be members of an individual ready reserve, according to the White House. Biden's executive order cites Section 12304 of Title 10 of U.S. Code, General Military Act, allowing the president to call up reservists for situations other than during war or national emergency, including named operations or cases a use or threatened use of a weapon of mass destruction. What could possibly go wrong? Or a terrorist attack or a threatened terrorist attack in the U.S. that results or could result in significant loss of life or property. The U.S. military, however, described the mobilization as merely expanding entitlements and access to funding. Army Lieutenant General Douglas Sims, the Joint Staff Director of Operations, told reporters at the Pentagon on Thursday that the order benefits troops and families, which increases in authorities, entitlements, and access to the reserve component, forces, and personnel. Again, what could possibly go wrong? This will not change the current force posture levels in Europe. European commander, again, spokesperson Navy Captain Bill Speake, said in a statement, again, what could go wrong? Operation Atlantic Resolve is the informal name for actions the U.S. military has taken since April 2014 after Crimea rejoined Russia following the Washington-backed coup in Kiev. What could possibly go wrong? So we're sleepwalking into World War III. Didn't have that on my bingo card for 2023. So, folks, do we A, allow this to continue on and not call out our politicians? Or B, do we speak out? This war has gone on long enough. Billions of dollars has been wasted. Lives have been lost. This isn't open for debate anymore. Diplomatic actions must take place. A ceasefire must happen. The war must end. Enough people have died. Enough people have suffered. Enough money has been wasted. And we already saw from that recent NATO summit how angry and upset Zelensky was. And by the way, he did do a apology video where he thanked everyone. So you could tell that the little dog, thinking that it was a big dog, got a newspaper to the head. It's got to end. Peace must happen.